Hey guys, welcome to another episode. A lot has happened between last episode and now. A lot of it's kind of those tedious small things that aren't super exciting to see. We put on our intake manifold, the plenum. We put on an aftermarket fuel pressure regulator. Just put our fuel pump in, our fuel filter, run some new rubber lines. It's stuff that's really basic and not super exciting content for you guys to watch. I did do a time lapse of some of those things, so make sure to get those up here for you guys. You guys can see where we're at. I'm going to catch you up, and I'll meet you on the other side. Alright guys, now that you're caught up, there's a few reasons why we're going to get our drive shaft in and things like that. Is because we're going to be doing our first start and hopefully our first drive, and hopefully this thing starts up, at Vick Autosports open house on May 14th, 2022. You may be watching this in the future, but this is before the open house. We're going to be doing a first start live in person with everyone there at the open house. It's going to be really exciting. And hopefully we don't run into any hiccups, but what we're going to be doing today is doing a systems check. We're going to make sure everything is correct, our timing, make sure everything's connected, clean up some wiring on the dash, get that drive shaft in, a couple other small things that maybe need to be installed. That way, when we get up there to the open house, we're all set, ready to go, and we can try to fire this thing up for the first time. Of course, we're going to record it for you guys, but I'd love for you to see it there live in person. So let's get all the small stuff started, get the car up in the air, and start with this drive shaft, and move on to the next thing. So let's get started. Alright, so we're going into our stash and we are pulling out our drive shaft hardware right here, which is great because we labeled it. If you guys remember a long time ago, I'll make sure to drop a link to that video up in the top where we refreshed our drive shaft. We made sure to put them in a bag and label it. So all the hardware is here, ready to go. And now we can jump under the car and get this thing lifted. Alright, so we're underneath the car, and before we can even get started, we have to torque down our flex joint here. These are torqued to 51 foot-pounds. This is our new flex joint. After we torque them, we're going to cut this band. You want to make sure you cut this brand new band on there. It's just to keep it together while we put it together. So we're going to get this torqued. We're going to do a two-stage torque. We're going to do 30 foot-pounds all the way around, and we're going to finish off with 51. Alright, so we've got those torqued to the 51 foot-pounds, but I've come to realize that I'm missing part of the drive shaft and I've got to order it. So I have to put that on delay until it comes in. But we're going to move on to the next thing, which is the hood. It's been sitting in storage for a long time, so we're going to go out and get it. We're going to put it on some sawhorses and wash it, and then buff it with a thicker, kind of a more coarse grit, and then a fine grit. That way it'll match the rest of the car, which we've buffed before, and I'll make sure to put a link up there for that one as well. So let's go grab it, let's get it out and start cleaning it up. Alright, so we've got it washed. We'll have to pull off our faded emblem here. There's 2 screws on the back with an access hole here in the front. You can see how faded this paint is. Some scuffs in it, etches in the paint all along the edge here. I've got a correction pen to where I can make this kind of blend in. It's not going to be perfect, but it's better than leaving it the way that it is. And you might be able to see these little dimples all throughout the paint here, just where the sun is just baked to this poor hood. So hopefully we're able to get a lot of these scuffs out and scratches with the buffer. Again, we're going to go with a coarse one first, and then we'll upgrade to a more fine one, hopefully work it out, and we should be able to get this looking way better. But just a lot more of those dimples. Hopefully those won't spread as we take the buffer across it. But first things first, let's get this removed, and then we can have free space to clean the entire thing. Alright, and we can see with one pass the difference of buffing just with the more coarse compound. I'm using the Meguiar's Ultimate compound here, and it's actually making a big difference. And this is just one pass, and it's already, you can see yourself. So this is going to turn out really good, just like we did on the rest of the car, and it's going to make a really big difference just comparing the two. So we're going to keep getting back to work here and making it look all, well, as new as we possibly can. So we can see what a difference this first initial buff did. We can actually see ourselves in it. It's not all dull. We do still have some white marks from scratches and things, and I've got that filler to fix that. But it's already come through. We're going to go up to the next level of buffing compound, start getting some of these finer scratches out of it, hopefully get some of this out and work its way out along the edges here as well. So hopefully we'll be able to start working some of those out, and we'll start be able to do some touch-up paint. It's already looking so much better to start matching the car. And then when we pulled off the emblem, looks like someone had a hard time keeping it down because they hot glued it on here, so we get to pry that off, but at least it's under the logos. We'll get it out. Now that we've got that finally rubbed and buffed and everything like that, we can start filling in these little spots. I've got this Duplicolor black paint pen, and all we have to do is dab it in here if it wants to work. Anyway, you dab it in there. I gotta shake it up. You dab it in there and it fills the spot with paint. So I just gotta shake it up. Come on. Alright, now it wants to cooperate with me. What I have to do is press it in there, and you draw. It's like coloring with a colored pencil or a marker. And it fills in those lines, and the little marks start to go away. So we're gonna be doing this, doing a little bit of coloring, getting this stuff filled in, start making it look better. Mainly on the big spots, you know, something like this. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than the scratch or ding or whatever's in there. So we're just gonna work our way around, fill up all these little spots, or big ones like this, and take a look when it's all put together. So we've got those cracks and chips filled in. At a glance like this, way better. What a difference. You can only really tell where there's been fill-ins when you get real close. So here, here, and even then it's kind of tough to see, but way better than the white spots and the rust spot colors coming through on all of this. So it's filled in for the most part, not perfect. We can still go around and do some more along the edges, especially what's rubbed on the hood. But this is going to work for what we're trying to do. I don't know if I want to install it quite yet. Maybe as we get closer to the open house date, we'll install this. But now we can move on to the next thing. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is verify my timing marks. So I want to make sure everything is lined up correctly, make sure my rotor is pointed to the number 4 cylinder on a compression stroke, make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. That way when we get there and do our first start, we don't have to verify it, but we probably will anyway, just to be safe. But we're going to check here, that way we already know we have a good start, and we'll verify when we get there. And make sure everything's all lined up, because the last thing we want to do is wreck this brand new engine on the first start. It'd be really embarrassing. So let's check out these marks and make sure we're all right. My timing marks are not set up right now to look correct, so this is a perfect opportunity to make sure we are in time. We've had to fiddle with the timing belt and a few other pieces that are on here, and it's kind of knocked it out of place to where it's not where it should be. So what we're going to want to do is get to the crankshaft on the bottom. You're going to need a 1.5 inch socket or 38 millimeter. You're going to want to get all the way down here onto your crankshaft. We're just going to turn it over until the timing mark, and I have it with a white mark. We're going to have to get that showing so you guys can see where it's at. Let me get this turned to where you guys can see it, and we'll be able to take a look. Alright, so we've got it turned over to where you can see I've got my timing mark with the white paint on it. On the back side, if I can get it just right, there should be some little teeth. You might be able to see those there, and you want the white mark to be lined up on the middle tooth. Let me see if I can really get in here for you. Just like that. So you see how those are lined up right in the middle. So as I sneak you back out of here, the next thing we're going to want to look at is you go one up. This is our auxiliary shaft. Now the difference here is if you have fuel injected, there's a no lobe on the shaft in here. Now if you have a carbureted, that means you probably have a mechanical pump. These have electric. The fuel injected have electric. So if you have a mechanical pump, there's a lobe on this. And so you see the middle nut, then you'll see the 2 dots. Those 2 dots point at the spring, the tension spring here. So it's just in a straight line straight to that bolt there. That's how you know this one's in line. Then you move up, and on your cams you'll see there's 2 dots on this one, 2 dots on this one, and they go right to these little arrows. That's how you know you're in time. That also means your number 4 spark plug is on compression. So to verify that this is all set correctly, we're going to open our distributor cap, and when we open it, the rotor should be pointing at the number 4 spark plug wire. So let's get this removed and we'll take a look to verify. Alright, so as we go to remove our cap, you're going to notice that there's numbers on top of the cap. Those are the cylinders, 1, 3, 4, and 2. Our number 4 wire is actually on the bottom here, this one here. And this is our main coil coming in from the coil right here. Loops around, up through the middle. So as we remove it, the rotor should be pointing at the number 4. And it is. So when we look inside the cap, that forward bottom one is number 4. So when we put our cap on, that's the one that's firing when we go to start up. Now you can, if you need to, you can loosen the 17 millimeter nut on the bottom and you can adjust the bottom of the distributor. If you happen to have the Vick Auto HEI electronic ignition system after the aftermarket one, you'll actually notice that there's a casting line right here from where it's made, and that happens to be exactly relatively close to where the number 4 cylinder fires. So if you get this lined up with that on the bottom relatively close, that's how you know you're right within the mark and you should fire up. So that's a good sign we're all set correctly. We can put our cap back on, make sure all of our plug wires are tight, and do one more check. Since I know all my timing marks are lined up, I'm going to put my socket back on the crank one more time, and I'm going to do a few rotations to make sure everything is set correctly, the tension on the belt is correct, and that we are fully in time and nothing's going to hit each other. Okay, so we went all the way around. I have really good compression because I was having to fight that pretty good. But everything is back in place. All my marks are back straight. So we know that we're in time, we're all clear, we're not hitting. It's a really good sign. So we're that much closer to getting that first start. The next thing we're going to want to do is verify that our plug wires are going to the correct spark plug. Now it seems kind of silly to check that. You just do it as you go. But you'd be surprised how many times you miss it by accident by switching to or having them in the wrong order. So what we're going to do is we're going to double check that each one of these goes to the correct spot. So number 1, we trace it up here to number 1. 2, there underneath, comes up and around to number 2. We've got number 3 up to number 3, and then finally number 4 in the back, and then our coil up the middle. And make sure they're all the way on there. You lose spark by them just falling off also. So now we're back in the trunk area, and one thing I want to do is, you can see here on the fuel line there's a tight bend here, and especially on our return line there's a tight bend here, and even when we get up to the cab you can see there the return line is kinked. And the last thing we want to do is starve our engine of fuel or have too much fuel pressure and we have a problem with lines bursting, things like that. So what I've done to solve that problem is I went to the hardware store and got these brass 90-degree elbows. And we're going to put these in there with some clamps, and this will take off some of that tension from especially the return lines there and there. It'll make a big difference and nice smooth for the fuel so we don't have too much pressure. That way we don't pop any lines, because that'd be really, really messy and really bad. So let's start cutting these in. So we've got those all connected. It was a bit of a pain to get them in there, and I'm going to be the first to tell you, to be honest, I don't like this at all. Look at all these ridiculous clamps, different sizes, and this is just, I'm not digging this at all. More clamps mean more opportunities for leaks. It's a good idea. I thought it was a good idea, but I just have a feeling this is going to leak really, really bad. So what I think I'm going to do is get an actual like stainless steel line and go from under the car to where the return line is supposed to become rubber. I'll have a rubber joint, then mold that rubber or the new metal line up through the spot and bend it smoothly, and have another rubber joint here at the end and do the same thing for the feed line. That way we don't have all this nonsense going on here. I mean, this looks ridiculous. So this is temporary. I'm going to replace this. I don't like this at all, but hopefully it'll work for a first start. I may have time to switch this out. If I do, I'll get it done off camera, because it'll only take a second to bend it and put a clamp at the end like this, and then metal line. So I don't like it. We're just going to leave it like that for now, but it's better than kinked off lines for when we get to that point, but it's not going to stay that way. So the last thing that we're going to do for today is start installing our bracket and maybe even our hood. We're going to see where we end up, but we're going to start putting our brackets on. This is the spring that helps hold up the hood. Our pivots for the hood are still attached to them, so we might be able to bolt those in, but it's kind of a balancing act. But we'll just start with the easy stuff with these brackets, and then we'll see where we end up for the hood. So I'm going to show you what I'm doing here really quick. Is these have a little tongue on the top. They fit in this slot, and then the arch fits over the piece of plastic, just like that, holds it in place. And you take your screw and you thread it in. Mine have clearly been changed out over time, because that's not original. but this one broke off on the inside there. We went to remove it originally, so we'll have to drill that out, tap it, and put a new one, or just a small Phillips head screw with a nut on the back side to hold it in place. But 3 should be okay for now. We can always drill that out here in a little bit just to get this started. Alright guys, we are back. It's been like 3 or 4 days or something like that. But the parts that we've been needing have been delivered. A good friend of mine hooked me up with some of these parts. The cross member for our carrier our carrier bearing in the middle for our drive shaft. And our forward yoke also came in, but they're pretty crusty. We've got to clean them up, maybe even paint them. Depends how far we're going to go with that. So we're going to get those cleaned up. Maybe we'll be able to move on to the windshield. It's probably more like a 2-person job, so maybe not. Same thing with the hood, probably more of a 2-person job. I'm sending the trunk lid to go get painted. It's a gray primer, so I'm hoping that it'll match by the time we get to the open house, so that way I can install it and have it with us when we go and don't have the trunk all open. So we're just gonna keep trucking along, get this drive shaft installed, maybe some other stuff, clean up some emission stuff out of the engine bay as we prepare for that first start that's coming oh so closely. So let's get started. So I apologize for the wind noise, but I'm getting this old grease out of here and you can just see how gross that stuff is. I'm definitely gonna be replacing this. And I ran a quick test with my grease gun and our grease fitting works. You can see there's the grease came through there no problem. So we'll be greasing the splines before we put it in there, and then we'll cap it off with our grease gun. But this stuff is just gross. Looks like peanut butter, kind of. Not the kind of thing I want down in there. So we're gonna get this cleaned out and we can finally jump underneath the car. So we've got it initially started on our splines here, and I just pushed it by hand, and it's a nice snug fit like it should be. So I took the dead blow hammer, cheapy one, the Harbor Freight Special, started hammering it down a little bit, and it's kind of got to the point where the rubber on the carrier bearing was just kind of absorbing the shock. So what I did is I put my foot on the block, held the neck here, and I took a little bit of a heavier hammer and lightly tapped around, and I slowly started to bring it down. So we're trying to get this rubber collar all the way back to where we can see a witness mark on the back of our drive shaft. So we are ready to install the drive shaft, but what we're going to do is put the rear first, feed it up through above our handbrake cable, which is right here. Feed it up through there, and this will help hold it a little bit, I'm hoping. And that way we have some help because we're on our own. So these have 13mm nut and bolt combinations. I'm going to feed this drive shaft from the front to back, and hopefully it'll play nice. There it goes. This is where you gotta be strong. Alright, so it's gonna be kind of a funky angle, but we've got our holes lined up right there with our drive shaft and our rear diff. Gonna come up and through here right over my face, held up by the parking brake cable temporarily. We've got our bracket with new grommets. I got these from Harbor Freight, little 180 packs. multi-size grommets. Great time to have them. So we're going to be using those to slide them up on our studs. And I've got the yoke mostly set in there. I just have it pushed in there because if we attach the bolts on the back first and then try and do this, you're not going to make it. So we have to slide this back, slide the yoke in, and then lift the drive shaft up and then backwards a little bit and get those bolts started. And then we can move from there forward, get this lined up, and then finally up into here. So let's start in the back. Alright, so those are down and torqued. Those are 25 foot-pounds. So we're going to move on next as we scoot up along our handbrake, if I don't blind myself, right up here with our carrier bearing. You can see it lined up perfect with the studs and our nice new grommets. So we're going to grab our nice big flat washers and our nice new nut, and probably throw in a lock nut too, just to be safe on both sides, and get this up to the body. It's looking good. We're getting there. Alright, we are at the last hurdle here. You can see we've got quite a gap going here. Now we've got a little bit of work to make this up, but this yoke actually can travel up and down those splines, so that's an option. But we also have a little bit of give on our holy moly, our carrier bearing, if I can speak. Our carrier bearing has a little bit of adjustment also. I left those loose on purpose. That way I can move around just a little bit. But I think what we're going to have to do is, in order to get this lined up, we're going to have to tap with our dead blow a little bit to work this back forward, and then we can feed in our bolts. On this side, they go bolt first and through like that with a nut on the back side, the locking nut. So we're just going to play with this. I think you're just going to see a whole bunch of my hands in your face. So we're going to play with this, do one at a time, do this one, get it at least through there, rotate, do the next one, and do the next one. Then we'll get the nuts on there, and then we'll suck them all down, and maybe that'll move this forward for us. And before we wrap up, we'll definitely make sure to grease it here on our grease fitting, and tighten up our carrier bearing bolts, make sure those are nice and tight, and then finally cut this band, this metal band here. You do not want that exploding on you down the road, because it'll be one massive bang. So we definitely want to make sure we get that taken care of too. So it's not really exciting, but we're just going to suck these down and get this straightened out. There's one thing I do want to point out is you can see that we're touching here. We've also got some touching going on right here, and everything is nice and tight towards where it's supposed to be, and you can see we're rubbing, creating a nice line on our drive shaft. So this is going to need to be addressed, but I have a really strong suspicion that it's because the car is up off the ground like that, where the wheels are up, so it's pulling down on the axle, which would pull down on the drive shaft, causing it to rub like that. So we will get the car back on the ground, and then we will take a look underneath and see how this is. But other than that, we can see just how good all of this turned out. Nice new pieces, sucked right up. And what's even better is when you come under here, bring my light with us, like that. When you look under here, you can see there's still dirt marks all the way up to this rubber boot here. And that means that we are seated pretty much where the last one was, because as soon as we peel this back, you can see that shiny black. So we are right where it needs to be, so everything should be lined up how it was before it was ever removed. So perfect fitting part. We're going to get our grease gun, we're going to fill this up with grease. Maybe we'll see it come out the back a little bit, but I want to make sure this is nice and full. We'll see if we can get this outer casing. Yeah, we'll turn this outer casing to get that grease turned around in there. And then once we get this thing running and driving, which hopefully will be here soon with the next few weeks at this open house at Vick Auto, and we'll be able to come back through after a few road trips around the block, which I'm really hoping is going to happen, and we'll top that off and make sure it's really lubricated. We did put lube on the splines as we were fitting it on there, so there is some in there, so it's not just dry, but more the merrier. You can never have too much. Last step is to cut this band. Don't forget, we're gonna cut it. All right, so the car is on the ground, and we can see we have plenty of clearance where that nut is. Maybe we can change my light here. Yeah, so right here, you can see where that line used to be, that silvery line right there, where that nut used to hit it. And we can see we have plenty of clearance. Even my flashlight fits between there. Plenty of clearance for our handbrake cable. So we are looking good. Nice, plenty of room. Everything looks great. We'll move on to the next one. What I really want to get rid of next is this vacuum charcoal canister thing. Smog, don't need it. And there's a big old crack in it. I don't know how well you are gonna be able to see that, but there's a big crack right there, and that is asking for a vacuum leak. So what I've done is I'm gonna cap this up already. It's just kind of a makeshift for now. Hopefully that doesn't cause too much of a vacuum leak. It's got a couple 10mm bolts on there, hooked up to a hose down here, and we're gonna blow some air through the line and make sure it's actually clear so the tank can vent. And maybe what we'll do is just take it off at the tank and have a little filter at the end and have it vent under the car. That way, that's better. That way we're still venting the tank and it doesn't create vacuum and try to implode on itself, because that'd be no fun. So we're gonna unhook it from the line here. Okay, and out it comes. So now you can see that crack a little bit better. That's just asking for a vacuum leak, and this thing is ugly. You can hear all the maraca I got going on here. So no more of that. And now look at this awesome amount of space we've got. Maybe we can start tidying up some wires. This white wire has been in the way for a long time. I don't know what it is. I'll have to chase it down somewhere, but it's got some really bad connections on it from someone before me. So one more thing to chase down on this. We're getting there. I need to reattach the fan. When we were working on our timing, I didn't put my fan back on, so I need to do that. Just little stuff. We're getting there. So much closer to the start. I'm so ready to start this thing. But one thing at a time. Last thing we need is our metal fuel line to show up back here. I'm gonna wait for that metal line to show up to get rid of this awful mess and make this better. And then I think the next big thing is gonna be windshield hood, but I've got to have someone help me do it because I don't want to break the glass. So what we may do is roll it out and get this cleaned up, vacuum out all this dirt, put some of the stuff back on, the trim wouldn't hurt because it's missing up front here. Get that other trim ring out, put it on, get that situated. I might be able to put the hood on. I'll need to find the bolts to put it on there, clean this up, so we stop that and see what I can come up with. Maybe I'll be able to put the brackets on, then the hood, or I don't know. I'll have to play with it. I'd like to get the hood on it, make it look not so project-like. Getting that grill and trim back on is so much better. That chrome ring on the headlight there is just kind of hanging there until we get the inner part that'll screw to. But it is a world of a difference. The car is starting to look like an actual car. Starting to get those pieces back in. I mistakenly put the trim piece on before the grill, so I had to take it off and put it back on there. And then I had to find another little clip that the screw goes into to hold that up. And there is supposed to be a little piece of rubber gasket that goes around this border to protect the paint, but I'm gonna have to get a roll of that. I don't have it on me, but we'll get that fixed on there. But it already looks so much better. It's starting to look like an actual car. And while we were doing that, couldn't have been more perfect timing, because our metal fuel line showed up. It's a coated line, it's stainless, but it's just coated, and we're gonna start working on this. So I'm gonna undo all this stuff. You guys saw me put it all on there. It's horrible. Don't do this. I'm gonna relieve the pressure out of the tank, and then I can start pulling these rubber lines off. And I'll just do little rubber joints on there to bring the metal to the metal and make this go away on both sides. So I'll show you the progress. Not gonna be super exciting. Flaring the metal ends, putting it on there, rubber piece, clamp, keep on going. All right, so we've got that new line back in. You kind of see it back there, that metal line with a nice little short rubber hose. We did flare it at the end. You saw me do that. That way we have something to grip onto, and the fuel doesn't run by that. Much better than that awful monstrosity that was on there before. We got nice smooth bends in our feed line, so that's good. All taken care of. Looking way better, a lot more decent. And there's just a lot of curves. I really wish this would be a different kind of design. Maybe come through this way and loop around, but this is just really tight for me. So with that, I think that's going to be the end of this episode. We've covered a lot of stuff, and I think we're running long on time. I really appreciate you guys watching. We are getting so close to that first start, and we are just preparing all this stuff for that first start at the open house, which should be in a week. By the time that this video drops, it'll be 1 week from today, on the 14th. So we are really close. I think I'll do one more video of us putting the windshield in, maybe the hood on, which will be like the day before the open house on the 13th. So be on the lookout for that. I'm gonna see if I can get some help. Maybe I'll be able to, maybe my wife will come out and help me. Yeah, we'll see about that one. But it's worth a shot to ask, you never know. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. It really does help me out, really supports the channel. And until next time, we'll see ya.